Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Scott Jeffrey Miller. He is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author and currently serves as the Franklin Covey Senior Advisor on Thought Leadership. He is also the author of multiple books, including Management Mess. There was Management Mess to Business Success and a whole other ones on that. His latest book, or really book series, is Master Mentors, which we've been talking a lot about in the show. And he's also the host of On Leadership with Scott Miller, which is the world's largest weekly leadership podcast, fabulous podcast. I really encourage you to go and have a listen to that. Some amazing guests. Those guests have become part of this book series called Master Mentors. We talked a lot about that in part one of the show. If you didn't get a chance to hear part one and you just happen to come in now, go back and have a listen. I promise you some really deep insight, particularly into what does it mean to mentor. It's one of those terms that's kind of nebulous for a lot of people. What is a mentor? Am I mentoring? Am I coaching? Am I guiding? Am I leading? And Scott laid it out beautifully in talking about the people who've been mentors in his life. When we talked about invisible mentors or people, accidental mentors, people who don't know they're mentoring us, and people we don't know we're mentoring, and how to do that in a really great way. We talked about the distinction between leadership and mentoring, and we talked about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and we talked about the impact that having a great mentor can have on you, even if they don't really know it. It's a fabulous part one. In part two here, we want to dive into some of the mentors that have been featured in this book series, Master Mentors. And, when Scott and I talked about it, I really thought what was interesting about it was the idea that these people are often very successful and very powerful individuals, but they've got more to offer than here's the latest business strategy. There was a guest we had on this show about a year and a half ago that I know is featured in Scott's book, and that was Bobby Herrera. Now, I got really great feedback around Bobby Herrera and who he was, and I know that his story had massive impact on you, Scott, and you put it in the book. Can we jump in and start with him?
Love to. Remember that each book has 30 mentors. They tend to be equally split amongst genders, and hopefully there's a healthy level of diversity, both in terms of race and nationality and thought as well too. Bobby Herrera is mentor number 32, so the second mentor in the second volume. He's a very successful entrepreneur. Wrote a book called The Gift of Struggle. Easy, short read. You can read the book in 2 hours. I highly recommend your listeners and viewers picking up a copy of the book of Struggle, The Gift of Struggle. Bobby was one of, I think maybe 13 children from a Latino family, a family from Mexico. And his father happened upon a New Mexican, an American farmer. And the New Mexican farmer invited Bobby's dad to come over and work the farm and bring the kids with them legally into the country. Well, knock, knock, knock. And here comes the dad with all these kids showing up. Not exactly what the New Mexican farmer had in mind, but Bobby was in fact the first of all the children born in New Mexico and was raised in a large Latino family of very humble financial means. And Bobby shares this story that I think is life-altering for everyone who's listening now, Dove, to your podcast. Bobby and his brother used to play basketball. I believe it was basketball for their high school basketball team. And every night after their away game on the basketball bus, they would stop at a local restaurant and the entire team would get off the bus and go in and either lick their wounds or celebrate their successes. And every night the basketball team got off, went in to have dinner, except for the Herrera brothers.
Yes.
They stayed on the bus because there was no money in the Herrera household to both fund basketball and dinner. So every night when the entire male basketball team got off and went into the restaurant, the Herrera brothers stayed on and they ate the brown bagged dinner their mom had packed for them.
Right.
I mean, think about how humiliating that would be. Mm-hmm. For me, it would be, horribly humiliating. Well, every night this happened until one night when the entire team had gone in to have dinner at the restaurant. One of the team members' fathers, a fairly successful, well-known businessman, came back out and reboarded the bus and walked to the back of the bus where Bobby and his brother were eating their brown bag dinner, and basically said in a very non-intimidating, non-righteous style, said, "Hey, boys, I want you to join me for dinner tonight. I'm paying for dinner. No one needs to know. In exchange, all I want from you is to make something of yourselves and pay it forward in life." And Bobby said it was that evening when that man, his name was Mr. Teague, reboarded the bus. It was the first time he'd ever felt seen by anyone in his life. He had no plan for his life. Hell, he couldn't see tomorrow, let alone next month or next year. Bobby said it was the first time as a transformative experience. This man was a transitional figure for him. Reboarded the bus and said, "I see you. Come join the team for dinner. No one needs to know I'm paying for it. Go make something of yourselves." Now, the man did not think that a $5 hamburger was going to change anybody's life, but Bobby said it did. It was the first time he'd ever felt seen. Fast forward 25 years, Bobby Herrera serves in the U.S. Army. He becomes a very successful entrepreneur of, I think, a nearly $500 million company. And he writes this book called The Gift of Struggle, 30 years later. Remembers Mr. Teague, finds him, invites him to the launch party, flies him out to the launch party, and tells this story in front of hundreds of guests at this book launch party. Not a dry eye in the house. Mr. Teague flies back home, calls up Bobby the next day or two and says, "I remember that day." I'm getting emotional again. I'm not a crier, I promise. I remember that day. He said, "I had no idea the impact that had on you. And Bobby, you've made my life worth living. You, just by telling me that story, you've made my life feel that it had purpose." And I think the takeaway on this is multifaceted, Dove. I think it's to recognize who reboarded the bus for you, who made you feel seen, and to make sure you thank them. Write them a note, call them up. If they're not living anymore, find their widow or widower, find their grandchild and say, "Hey, 40 years ago, your grandfather did this." And secondly, it's to figure out with your power, your positional power, your coercive power, your utility power, your financial power, whatever small power you have, whose bus can you reboard? Who can you make feel seen by a strategic, thoughtfully placed compliment? "Hey, I like how dedicated you are to your family. I like how balanced your life is. I appreciate in you your ability to put your head down and stay focused in an onslaught of distraction." Whatever it is, make sure you recognize the person who made you feel seen, and also identify who can you make feel seen in your own circle of influence. Powerful story by the book, The Gift of Struggle by Bobby Herrera.
Yeah, it is a wonderful book, and it is a powerful story. And thank you for highlighting it in the way that you did, because, it is this, okay, he got to feel seen, and there's always this, like I talked to Bobby about this, that we were very poor as kids too, in my family and my background. And I said, and I hated getting charity. I knew we needed it and we got it, but I hated it. I felt yucky about it. I felt like other people knew, because in England, when you go to school, you wear a uniform.
Yeah.
And my uniform was a secondhand uniform. And it was evident it was a secondhand uniform. It didn't fit me quite right. And, and it was just screaming charity. And this man did not scream charity. He just said, "Let me lift you up, and nobody needs to know. Let me see you." And when I talked to Bobby, it was like, that's how Bobby lives. He lifts people up who don't even know. There's no screaming of charity. He's just in service. Yeah. And I just it's a great story. It's a great book. And again, I mean, you've highlighted it in your book, and I know the book is full of those powerful stories. Let's talk about another one, which is Zafar Masood. Talk about that one.
Zafar Masood is actually the first mentor, number 31. Zafar is a Pakistani bank CEO. He's the CEO of the Bank of Punjab, one of the largest, consumer banks in Pakistan. And just about 2 months after the pandemic started, so in May of 2020, when airline jets were back in service, he took a flight from, I think it was Lahore to Karachi, fairly standard flight. It's like flying from Toronto to, I don't know, Chicago or something, hour and a half flight, maybe a little longer than that. And he always sits in seat 1B. So the forward cabin, first class, seat B, the aisle seat, always. It's like his seat. And he gets to the airport early one morning, and for whatever reason, the airline had him in seat 1A. It was the window seat. And he's like, no, I don't want that seat. And it was assigned. And so through some maneuvering, the airline reassigned him to seat 1B. Plane takes off, easy flight, hour and a half, goes to sleep. Just before landing, he wakes up, and the plane has a really turbulent, rough landing on the runway, like so rough that it was, like one of those once in a lifetime experiences where the plane lands but takes back off again. It rarely, if ever, happens to you. So violent that the cockpit doors swing open, and sitting in seat 1B, you can see the look of horror on the pilot's eyes, and the two flight attendants that are both Muslim women that are reciting the Quran. He also is a Muslim. They're not quite sure what's going on, but the plane circles around and comes back in for a second landing. And it's at that point, what they didn't know then that they do know now is on the first approach, the pilots had failed to lower the landing gear. And the plane had crash landed on the runway, and had, of course, irreparably damaged the engines. And as the plane came back in, it crashed into a densely populated residential neighborhood just outside of the airport.
Wow.
Where 98 people died in the plane. Only 2 survived, Zafar, Masood, and one other passenger. Everyone died. Grandmothers, grandparents, the pilots, the flight attendants. Everyone died except for 2 people. The plane crashed into some buildings, and Zafar Masood was ejected from the plane, and his seat 1B, landed on the roof of a building with him unconscious, on fire, upright, still strapped into his seat. The seat slides down off of the building, drops about 40 feet, and lands on the front of a car. Still upright, on fire, unconscious, strapped into a seat. The car was occupied with 2 young men getting ready to start it to go to work that morning, when all of a sudden all the windows blow out of their car, including the windshield. They come to and see a man sitting on their trunk and an airline seat. They get out, and through all of the fuel that's now engulfing this neighborhood and people screaming and dying and buildings on fire, they managed through a Herculean effort to rescue Zafar and take him out of this alleyway that historically is always gated and locked. For some reason, that rare morning it wasn't. Fast forward, Zafar survives this accident. One of 2 survivors, 98 people die. Of course, he lives with enormous survivor's guilt, this crippling syndrome I was not aware of. You've got to read the book to hear the story. But at the same time, that same week, my son, I have 3 sons that are 8, 10, and 12. My oldest son, Thatcher, who's named after one of my heroes, Margaret Thatcher, comes home from school and has a writing assignment. And the writing assignment is to write down all the family traditions in our house. So the next day, I'm leaning over Thatcher and I see him write, we go to church on Sundays, we go to the club for brunch, and we also watch movies. And I had this feeling of horror. Those aren't traditions. Those are activities. Those are like things we do. Those aren't traditions. Traditions are we go to the lake and catch fireflies for the month of June, right? Or we feed the homeless every Sunday and take away lessons and debris. I don't know. You get the point. There's a fine line between activities and tradition. And I had this thought of horror. And it was really Zafar's interview that helped me realize in order to set your priorities in life, you got to know what's most important to you. Like, what do you do after you survive a plane crash? Like, how do you live your life differently? Like, what's important to you? Does it matter if you've got a BMW or a Kia? Does it matter if you are the CEO or the vice president? Who cares about stupid stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to drive a nice car, but I'm not sure it matters after you have a life or death experience. And my point in writing the chapter, Dov, long story I know, is I want people not to have to survive airline plane crash to get their you-know-what together, to decide their priorities, to think about what's most important to them, to get really clear on what matters most to you. And once you have, then you ask yourself, what's next? What's next in my life? What should I be doing to make sure that my son next year writes, or my next son writes about our traditions and the things that he remembers about me as his dad? And you get the point. So it's a remarkable story. You've got to watch the interview. I mean, you cannot believe this is what happened along the way. And it will definitely snap you into reality of getting your priorities and your values straight in life.
But that's another great example, Scott, because you know that I fell off the mountain, got smashed to pieces. My life, quote, came to an end. And people say, it must have changed you. And I always say it didn't. People are shocked by that. And I say, it didn't. It didn't. My ego was way too big for it to change me. What it did was it embedded me. I became more of what I was before because I was like, I'm great. I'm coming back. It's only when everything appeared that it could go back to normal that I was then confronted with, is this really the way I want to live? Is this really what it takes? Or have I got to decide on something else? And, and I give that same message that you've just given, I think is important, which is you don't have to fall off a mountain or get flung out of a plane or die in a car crash or have a horrible diagnosis or whatever it is to realize that you've got to question the meaning of your life, the purpose of your life. What is it that gives your life meaning? What is it that you want to leave as the legacy of your life? Not your wealth, but the legacy of your presence on the planet. And so often we don't do that. And oftentimes there's an invisible mentor, like Zafar Masood, who he doesn't know you, but you read that story and you go, okay, just stop. And I ask people to do this all the time. Just stop and imagine it's you.
Yeah.
You fell off the mountain. You're smashed to pieces. You think you're pretty nice looking, but now you have a mishmash of a face. Your jaw's in 5 separate pieces. Your cheekbones are gone. Your nose is gone. All of it's gone. Your face looks like mashed potatoes. And you burn through your income in 3 months. So now you've gone from having any money in the bank to nothing. What do you do? What I did was I tried to get back. It doesn't work. What do you do? The answer is you look at people like this gentleman and his experience, and you say, what if it's me? I don't have to wait for that.
Right.
I always say that the universe whispers, then it talks, then it shouts, then it shoves you off the bloody mountain. And you can listen to the whisper. Maybe you stepped off the curb and you twisted your ankle a little bit and you go, what if this is the sign? What if this is the sign? It doesn't have to be radical. And I love that story because it's so dramatic. And it's insanely dramatic. It makes mine look like, it was a Sunday afternoon in the park. That it makes you stop and go, okay, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks. Thanks, Zafar, for having the courage, because Zafar has had some, backlash, right? With some Pakistanis who thinks he's making it up, or his story comes at the expense of the souls and legacy of others on the plane. And I don't know him well. I know of him fairly well to know I think his genuine nature is to try to bring memory to the people that lost their lives by having everyone else hear the story to take the whisper.
Well, there's an interesting piece in this whole idea of being mentored and allowing oneself to be mentored, even directly or indirectly. And that is, I believe that it's my truth. It's not the truth. I believe that we are constantly confronted with these opportunities to deeply examine who we are and potentially change our path. Most people don't. Most people will stick to the same path, even if it's destructive. It's from a place of psychology that I'm speaking now. However, these major events can do it, but you know what? So can a mentor.
Yeah.
And they change the direction of your life and cause you to reinvent. Now, you and I, Scott, we've had conversations before. You've been on the show before. I've been on your show. We've had lots of conversations in between. You've reinvented yourself. You've reinvented yourself several times from, you talked about who you used to be. You weren't kind, etc. And you were driven and all those kinds of things. And, you were screaming for the spotlight to being the guy who's gives the spotlight away through the podcast, etc. But another reinvention is you were the guy with Franklin Covey, and now you've reinvented yourself into being part of other businesses. Talk to us about how mentorship has impacted you in reinventing yourself.
What a genius way to cap this conversation. You are right. And I will take that compliment. I've reinvented myself multiple times over my life through self-disruption. I mean, the fact of the matter is, your life is going to be disrupted. You're never in the room when your career is decided for you. It's really a grotesque accusation, but it's shockingly true. So if you know that the CFO or the CEO or the Western region sales leader, someone is going to impact your life, I'd rather, act on myself than be acted upon. So because of that, I'm constantly moving outside of my comfort zone. I had no idea how to write a book. I didn't know how to write a column. I didn't know how to write a LinkedIn article. I didn't know how to host a book club on video or host a podcast. I mean, the vitriol that's come my way for my first 20 episodes, you would have thought I could barely have a command of the English language, or someone saying he talks too fast, or he's too arrogant, or look at his hair, or whatever. I mean, there were polls about my sexuality. How do you know my sexuality from listening to me? I had one guy send an email in that said, I've watched the host for like 14 weeks and I just can't seem to like him. I think, it took you 14 weeks to figure out you couldn't like me? Most people, it takes 14 seconds, but thank you for the try. My point is,
I admire your commitment to giving it a go, mate. I admire
your commitment to attempt to like me for 14 hours. My life's too short to spend that much time trying to like you. I hope that your viewers and listeners are finding some frivolity in this. I think my biggest success has been my willingness to move outside my comfort zone.
Right.
And to, quite frankly, not care a whole lot what people think about me. Not in a irresponsible way. I do care that Dove thinks I'm a increasingly kind, responsible, abundant person. I don't live my life enslaved to it. But I would say disruption is something that really is common to all these mentors. Is they're constantly moving outside their comfort zone and asking, why not? Why not me? Why shouldn't I try this? Some things are going to be successful. Some things are going to be abject failures. I mean, if you read the backstory to most of these mentors, I mean, Matthew McConaughey, how many parts he read for and didn't get?
Yes.
Until A Time to Kill came out. And Rachel Hollis, how many books she wrote that flopped until Girl Wash Your Face came out, and on and on and on. So I just repeat this theme about self-disruption. You're going to be disrupted. And the more you do it yourself, the more you will be emotionally agile and mentally nimble, so that when something does come your way that you weren't prepared for, you're like, okay, well, how do I make that happen? I love this phrase, and I live my life in alignment with this. Sometimes a disappointment turns into an appointment. And I that's like the lens through which I watch everything. I get down to the last interview for a TV reality series and they pass. And I say, okay, so what will I do at that 200 hours? Where should I redeploy that, right? Or something happens and I want this book to succeed. And well, how can I use the flop of that book to teach others what not to do? So I love this phrase, sometimes a disappointment turns into an appointment. And I think it's our job to figure out an appointment for what. And that might be glib. There's people that suffer traumas and tragedies. I've not suffered trauma or tragedy in my life yet. So I don't mean to minimize. Sometimes you have big disappointments that aren't always an appointment. But I think generally speaking, this is something that can be replicated by anybody listening today. You don't have to have my title or my career to disrupt yourself. Move outside your comfort zone and test yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that these events, it's my truth is not the truth. But I believe that these events, these big events that disrupt us, are there to wake us up from and to wake us up to. They're there to wake us up from something we're doing that's probably not serving us at the way that we really need. And it's there to wake us up to how we can serve, right? But you can't serve in the way you need to until you wake up from what you've been doing. And the only way to get to that is through disruption. And if disruption is falling off a mountain or getting thrown out of a plane, sure. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be. It can actually be through mentorship, through going, I have a good friend. He was here yesterday, came to visit me. I've known him for more than 30 years. Right? I've known him since he was 21. He's now in his 50s. He's got kids and all the rest of it. I knew him when he was a kid, and we used to hang out. And he said to me, Dov, you're one of the smartest guys I know. I'm going to learn from your mistakes.
That's true.
Right. And we go for a walk yesterday, and he goes, shit, I wish I'd have taken that in. Right? He goes, I know I said it, and I know I did, but I just wish I'd done a lot more of it.
Hey, Doug, can I end on a quick story?
Please.
I had the privilege of attending a funeral last week here in Utah, a funeral of the mother of my full-time employee. His name is Drew. He's one of 8 kids, a big Mormon family. And the mother was killed in a car accident about 2 weeks ago. Turned left and shouldn't have. Someone hit her and killed her. 8 children. The youngest, of course, like I said, was 26, my employee. Everybody flies in from around the world. Very sad, tragic event. The mother was in her mid-60s. And one of the children, a daughter, now in her 40s, each of the children had about 5 minutes to share something, large, long funeral.
Sure.
Well, this daughter spent her 5 minutes talking about her mom's legacy, and she recapped how she saw her mother in each of her 7 siblings. It was she went about 10 minutes, but she shared her mother's personality, her mother's humor, her mother's this or that, and how it came alive in each of the 8 children.
Wow.
It was a beautiful eulogy. And I kind of thought, I'm 54. I don't want to die at 66. But if my youngest makes it to 26, that's launched. And if that's my funeral, where one of my kids can recap my life in such beauty, I don't want to die that early, but mission accomplished. I thought it was a wonderful example of how this mother had mentored all 8 of her children differently. They had different needs. They had different desires and fears and mistakes, and she never judged them. She just listened and asked big questions, open-ended questions. And I thought, this is a beautiful end of life, early end of life.
Sure.
But what a beautiful life.
That's really
a little
beautiful.
Off topic, but it just kind of brought home.
But it's not. But you see, I mean, here's an example. It's really an example of what we've been talking about. Because here's a woman who got to mentor you, and you didn't know her.
So true. It's so true. I left thinking, how do I make sure that my funeral is like this, where my children, they remember the bad things, but they choose to see themselves in me and the good things. And it was a beautiful tribute to this woman's life, who I met once.
But there you go. There's again, this woman doesn't know she mentored you.
Not at all. Right.
Right. And your kids may not know her impact on you, but they may impact their children.
They're going to get it. Totally. Right. Or their lives as well. Right.
What a beautiful place for us to finish, to really understanding the depth and gravity of embracing mentorship and being willing to disrupt yourself, allow beautiful, magnificent mentors to disrupt you. And I will just say one final point on this whole thing. As an example, my father was an incredible mentor to me. And I was asked about this on an interview many, many, many years ago. And they said, "Oh, was your father also a spiritual person? Did he travel? Was he into philosophy? Was he into physics? Was he into, the kinds of things that you learn and speak about?" And I said, "Oh, hell no." They go, "What do you mean?" I go, "My father was emotionally void, spiritually void, and a narcissistic sociopath." And they go, "He was your mentor?" And I go, "Yeah, because sometimes the mentors around you are the people who show you what not to be."
Wow, that's true. Yeah.
Right? I know that your book is not that. I know that your book is filled with these wonderful mentors who are showing us what to be. But when you recognize that you have mentors in your life who are showing you what not to be, then you'll also need mentors to show you what to be. And in order to do that, I highly encourage you to pick up these books, Master Mentors. They're a series, as I said, they're right there. Thank you. They're right there. They're a series. There's going to be 10 of them in the series. I'm grateful to Scott. Thank you for asking me to be part of it. I'm honored to be part of that. And among all those people, and just, like you said, it's laid out in such a way that you can randomly open a chapter and go, okay, I'll just read. Well, I wonder who this bloke is or who this lady is. And it's like, holy crap. Like, you got to take a note on that. Let's take, what was that? 10 pages? Let's just take a note. All right. That's amazing. 8, 9
3 pages or 3 pages.
3 pages. Yeah. And wow, I got to take a note on that, because that's like, I gotta marinate in that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And of course, before we go, I want you to make sure that everybody knows where they can find out more about you, your books, and all the amazing things that you're up to.
Well, scottjeffreymiller.com is my digital universe. On there are access to how to order my books, book me for a keynote, listen to any of the podcast episodes that I've taped, trying to keep up with Dove's. I just look at Dove's list on dovebarron.com. I just pluck his guest and bring him over to my show. It's the easiest way to ride a big wave, but I appreciate the spotlight and the platform today, Dove.
Scott, it's always a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you so much. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning of the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Business and political leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior. You can tap into this groundbreaking understanding and how to apply the anatomy of meaning extracted from the emotional source code to drive your people to live deeply meaningful, purpose-driven lives. I'm Dove Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between greatness and mediocrity in individuals and in companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the mentors that you have and the mentors you need. A mentor doesn't have to be somebody you spend Tuesday afternoons with. A mentor can be somebody who can teach you without you ever even meeting them. Go get these books, these Master Mentors books, and just stop and say, what is this person saying directly to me? It can be transformative for you. This is not about feeling good and woohoo, although you will, but it's about waking you up to the amazing gifts that you have that are hidden from you. And in reading these books, that's exactly what you do. I'm Dove Barron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.